Let's do some studying today. We are at the end of the Torah. Say Amen. That's good. So the end of the Torah. So we have this week, we're going to read Haazinu, which is the second to the last section of the Torah. And then next week we read a special section for Sukkot. And then on Simchat Torah we read the last one, V'zot HaBracha, the last section of the Torah. And then we roll the Torah back to the beginning. And because of that, we miss an important moment in the Torah. And I think it'd be worth just reading that. Don't take it out. You don't have to take it out. I'll find it for you. But just the end of the Torah, the last words of the Torah. Are you the kind of person like me who always takes a book and reads the last line first? I want to know if he gets the whale in the end. I want to know. I want to know if Tom Sawyer turns out to be a mensch. I want to know, you know. I want to know if Dorothy finds her way to Kansas, right? I want to know. I want to know what happens, right? Here's the end of the Torah, right? It's chapter 34. If you have it open, it's 12:10. Moses went up from the steppes of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the summit of Pisgah, which is that's a great metaphor. Pisgah means lookout. So lookout mountain, okay? Opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him the whole land, Gilad as far as Dan, Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, the whole land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev and the plain. You can actually see most of Israel from that spot, by the way. It's true. The valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. And the Lord said, this is the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'll assign it to your offspring. I'll let you see it with your own eyes, but you will not cross there. Sorry? Dirty trick. Yeah, or rubbing it in is more like it, right? So, well, it's a question about whether it's a dirty trick, Ron, or whether it's something that needs to happen. And then the bigger question is, forget for a moment the politics of the thing. In terms of personal life, isn't this the way it always is? You never get to see the completion of the job. You never get to see the end of the journey. You get to see your children move forward, right? Isn't that enough? All right, we'll find out. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the command of the Lord. Now, let's look at that line very carefully because they're going to interpret that line deeply. Vayamot Shama Moshe, Moses dies. Eved Adonai, this Moses, the servant of God, Be'eretz Moab, and then there's three words at the top of page 1211. Al Pi Adonai. Al Pi Adonai means by the mouth of God or by the word of God, right? And then it says he buried him in the land of Moab. Who's he? He buried him. Him is Moses. Who's he? It's got to be God, right? So what does God do at the end? Very interesting statement. What does God do? God buries Moshe. That's a there's a sort of sweetness to that. These two old friends who have spent this lifetime together, so intimate, and one friend buries the other. Now just keep that in mind about what that felt like for God for a moment, right? In the land of Moab, no one knows his burial place to this day. Moshe was 120 years old, 120. So if anyone ever wishes you 120 years, that's where it comes from, right? Bin 120, right? His eyes were undimmed and his vigor unabated. Again, lo kahata eno, which means his eyes, he could still see, right? Velo nas lecho. Lo nas lecho. Nas means to escape from someplace. Lecho means his moisture. His moisture didn't leave him. Translation. What? He didn't need Viagra. No, I'm not kidding. He was still a man. He was still a man. Yeah, that's what, I'm not, I think that's, the Bible's not ashamed of physical references nor sexual references. He still had it in him. Right? Because it was 120 years old. It was time for him to die. Vivku b'nei Yisrael al Moshe. They cried for him. They bewailed him. They cried for him 30 days in the steppes of Moab for 30 days. What doesn't it say? Before we get to the Midrash, what doesn't it say? What would you think it might say? What doesn't it say? First of all, it doesn't tell you where. Right? It doesn't tell you where he's buried. Now we're going to ask the question. So the rabbis are going to ask the question, how come nobody knows where he's buried? That's the answer. But first appreciate the question. Typically, when great men die, when great people die, we erect monuments to them, right? We don't know where Moshe is buried. Yeah, we know more. Begai Be'eretz, that's like saying in the San Fernando Valley. Somewhere in the valley, somewhere in this area he's buried, but we don't know the exact spot, okay? So that's one thing it doesn't tell. What else doesn't it tell? What might you expect? This is... What? Yeah, he doesn't say anything. So we want to know what happened. What was his response? Okay, hold on to that. Billy. Well, it says that a little bit later on. It'll say there was never another one like him. If you turn the page to 12:12, then you get that part. The eulogy is on page 12:12, right? Lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moshe. Now that's an interesting phrase, because if you could say never again there rose, that means when was this written? Yeah, it had to have been written long afterwards, if you can even say, whom the Lord had singled out face to face. Now, again, I want to look at the Hebrew, and I apologize for those who can't read Hebrew. You should read Hebrew, okay? You just got yelled at. You ready? Lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. By the way, that's a beautifully constructed poetic sentence, right? Translated literally, it's never rose up a prophet again in Israel like Moshe. Asher yada'o Adonai panim el panim. Yida'o Adonai doesn't mean singled out. From the word yada, yodea, means to know him or to be intimate with him. Remember, dot, again, is the word for physical intimacy, right? Yeah, it's intimacy. No one ever had an intimacy with God as close as Moshe. Panim el panim. Now, what's odd about panim el panim? What does it say about the face of God? Yes, please. All right, come on, don't. It says, if you see the face of God, what's supposed to happen to you? You're supposed to die. Moshe didn't die. He knew the face of God. Now, there's a writer who wrote a very interesting meditation on this whole idea of panim, right? What do you learn when you look into a person's face? What does it mean to learn how to read a face? Okay? The word panim in Hebrew is first of all, the word panim in Hebrew is plural. It's actually faces, because a person doesn't have a face. We have multiple faces, right? Second of all, the word panim, if you say in Hebrew bifnim, it means inside. Lifnim means within. To look at a person's face is to see their inside, is to see them from the inside out, as it were, to see their inside. To say that he saw God panim el panim is to say this is a man who knew the inside of God. Right? We're the only creature that makes love face to face. You know that, right? I know two things about biology. That's the second thing. We're the only creature who does that. And think about what that meant. And by the way, the whole human physiology is set up for this. It's a very strange thing. We really ought to do it, from the other side, but we don't do it from the other, because for human beings, physical intimacy and spiritual intimacy is deeply related. Face to face. We look at each other face to face. You know a man is a man if he looks you where? Right in the eye. Right? The idea of face to face is a kind of intimacy, a kind of inside look. He was the only one who knew God that way. No other prophet will know God as clearly. Look a bit more. All right? For the various signs and the potions and portents that the Lord sent him to display in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and his court, and for all the great and mighty awesome power that Moses displayed, L'chol Yisrael, in front of all of Israel. There's the eulogy, Bill. What else doesn't it tell you? Yes. Good question. So very good. So there's a tradition. Yes. Right. Who was there who saw it? And how could Moses himself have written this? If Moses is supposed to write the whole Torah, how could he write about? So there's a story that he wrote it, but he was crying while he wrote it. The other story is that Joshua wrote those lines. Okay. The other, that's a traditional way of understanding it. A modern way of understanding it would say, of course, this is the national myth. And the national myth says he's unique because he's the lawgiver. He's the founder. Mel. Yeah. And so those who say that God wrote the whole Torah and dictated it to Moshe say that Moshe wrote down this stuff, which is a little bit hard to believe. A little strange, right? No, I get it. I understand. So that's a problem as well. Yes? We don't know what he died. You're a doctor, that's why. You want to know what to do. 120 years old. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, Mimoshe, Lemoshe. All right, so that's a very complicated. Yeah. Lo kam b'Yisrael od Moshe. There was never another Navi. There was never another prophet like Moshe, right? So, yes. And so Moshe Moshe. So the tradition saw Moses Maimonides in the 12th century as a figure as great as the original Moshe. And I think Moses Maimonides saw himself as great as the original. He patterned his whole life on Moshe. The whole book, The Guide for the Perplexed, is a guidebook on how you find your way to the top of Mount Sinai. I mean, it really is a book on how to know God. That's what The Guide for the Perplexed is all about. So the later tradition understood that Maimonides is the only person who ever came as close to being Moshe with a clear vision of God, with a very clear vision of God. Okay, don't try to read The Guide for the Perplexed, though. It's a really perplexing book. Okay? You know what's missing from this book? What's missing? What happened next? Did he go to heaven? Was he welcomed by the angels? Does he live forever in a pantheon? Was he resurrected? Okay? Take a look at the first source. So I give you a set of sources here. These sources come from two places. The tradition, the rabbinic tradition, 1st century through 5th century, okay, which is 0 through 400, wrote many interpretive stories about these stories, okay? So this comes from those traditions, the words of the Midrash, and they were collected by various people. The best collection is in a book by Elie Wiesel, who also passed away this year, and Elie Wiesel's book called Messengers of God. So I took some of that stuff, and then some of the stuff I took right from the Midrash itself. You'll tell the difference in the literary style. When Moses learned his hour had come, he refused to accept it. Now look at that right away. He refused. He starts to argue. Moshe, who has been the faithful servant of God and put up with all this junk, when death comes to him, he's not going to accept it. Now, who are the rabbis arguing with, by the way? They're arguing with, if you need a sheet, just move over next to someone who's got. We have any more? Doug, we all out? Okay, just move. So he's arguing with, on the one hand, I want you to keep in mind that he's arguing with the rabbis here who are writing this story are arguing with a nascent Christian tradition, right? The Christian tradition, which is built all around the Passion of Christ, okay? One of the pieces of the Christian tradition is that Christ accepts death. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. The rabbis are creating a Moshe figure here who's very very distinguished, very different than Jesus, the Jesus that we're going to meet in the Christian tradition. And remember, they're next door to each other. In the 2nd, 3rd century, the rabbis are sitting in Tiberias, and right next door are the church fathers creating the Christian myth. The Christian myth, which is all about a Jesus who accepts crucifixion, not circumcision, crucifixion, because he's going to cleanse the world, he's going to save the world. And the rabbis who say, Moshe didn't want to die. Maybe your guy wanted to die, but our guy didn't want to die. Why didn't our guy want to die? Because he loved this world. Because it's not about another world. It's this world. He didn't want to die. He wanted to go on living, though he was old and tired of wandering and fighting and being constantly tormented by this unhappy, flighty people he was leading across the desert. He was exhausted. He just wanted a vacation. Give him an apartment in Netanya, right? I used to go to Netanya, where my friends used to live, and there's a boardwalk in Netanya, which is all old guys, and they're walking along the boardwalk, and they sit and they play chess, right? I always imagine one of them is Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? See that guy over there? That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Really? Yeah. They let him retire here. So what was in the Bible? Cover story, so that no one would call him up. No one will bug him. right? If you go ask him a question, he'll tell you, right? I mean, seriously, I was sitting in Netanya once. You ever been, you know what Netanya is? It's this beautiful city north of Israel. And the boardwalk is all so I'm sitting with my friend and we're drinking tea, and these two guys are playing chess, and my friend says, you know who these two guys are? I said, I have no idea. He says, go say hello. So I shake a hand. The guy says, you ever heard of the Sobibor concentration camp? I say, yeah. You ever heard of the revolt of the Sobibor concentration camp? I say, yes. Those are the two guys. Two guys survived the Sobibor concentration camp. They had a revolt. They stole gunpowder from the Nazis and blew up the crematorium and then escaped. Most of them got killed. Two guys survived. They're playing. I said, those are the two guys? He said, what's what they tell us? They told us. I mean, just like you don't know that they're heroes. You know, they're just like playing. You know, playing. All right. Now it's French. Now it's a French place, right? He put on sackcloth and covered him with ashes and composed 1,500 prayers. And he drew a circle around himself and declared, I shall not move from here until the decree is revoked. That's a rabbinic move, right? I won't leave here. Once more, his word shook the universe at its very foundations. Heaven and earth in panic consulted one another. What was happening? Had God decided to put an end to creation? And now what happens? Moshe needs some help. So who does he ask for help, right? Then there came to Moses' aid the 5 books of Torah, which bear his name. The Torah comes before the God and pleads his case to extend his life. But their intervention was unsuccessful. Then the fire joined its efforts in vain, and the sacred letters were rejected. Even the name of God was turned down. Its intervention proved useless as well. All right, so what happens now? All of the things that Moses was responsible for, the Torah, the letters, they come up to testify in his behalf. But what happens? God says, no, you have to die, right? You like all men, you have to die, right? Still, as the sound of Moses' prayer came to him above, grew even stronger, the Holy One summoned the ministering angels and commanded them, go down in haste, bolt all the gates of every firmament, for Moses' prayer was like a sword ripping and tearing. Nothing could stop it. In that instant, Moses said to the Holy One, Master of the universe, known and revealed to you is the trouble and pain I suffered on account of Israel until they came to believe in your name. How much pain I suffered because of them until I inculcated among them Torah and its precepts. I said to myself, as I witnessed their woes, so I will be allowed to witness their weal, their good fortune. Right? I had to put up with all that surahs. You owe me. You owe me. Now that Israel's hour has come, you tell me you shall not go over the Jordan? That's Ron's idea that he got cheated, right? Thus your Torah asserts, in the same day you shall give him his hire. You manifestly turned into fraud. There's a rule in the Torah that says when a workman does work, when do you have to pay him? At the end of the day. Moshe has spent a lifetime struggling with his people. He says, pay up. Pay up. And Moshe turns to God and says, you're a fraud. Bait and switch. It's worse than bait and switch. It's you made him work all day, but now you don't have his wages at the end of the day. Right? You are a fraud. I didn't say that. Right? Is such the reward for 40 years of labor until Israel became a holy people loyal to the faith? The Holy One replied, nonetheless, such is the decree is going forth from my presence. He has to die. And it's his time to die. And even though he worked 40 years, he doesn't get off. Now, why not? Start thinking about why not. And what's the alternative? I mean, imagine, you could have told the story differently. You could have said, he lives forever. He never died. You could have told a resurrection story. Why don't they want to tell a resurrection story? Why is it important to the Midrash to enumerate all of the reasons Moshe shouldn't have died, and then to tell us, nevertheless, he dies? Chris? They don't want him a figurehead, not just a figurehead. You don't want him to become God, right, David? Yeah. And you're right next door to a group of people who are talking about this God-man stuff, right? And you're in a Roman Empire, which is filled with stories and myths of God-men, of supermen. Yes?
It's a very sociopolitical point.
Okay.
There was a leader for our times. He was a leader for the desert. He was a leader who brought them out of the desert, into the desert, to the border. The question is, was he the leader who could govern a people once they settled the land?
So now this is a practical question now, right? So let me make Michael's point so you can all hear it. Every moment needs a different kind of leader. So the guy who takes you out of Egypt and crosses you through the desert may not be the best guy to put you in the land and govern you there. Because there are certain characteristics, certain character traits that are necessary to be the founder of something that are different when you're the sustainer of something, right? Think about the difference between the founder and the sustainer of something. Yes, please. Yeah, well, I mean, the question is, is there a model of somebody in the Bible or in real life? What are you talking about? In the Bible? Yeah, I think you're right. I think your implication is that there's nobody who really does a great job governing them in the land, right? There's nobody. King David is as close as you're going to get, right? And his adulteries are very famous, right? Right on the front page of the New York Times, okay? Not that that means anything to anybody. But had it been Moses, it would have been disastrous. Had it been Moses, it would been disastrous, and you'll see why in just a moment. But what was the one Pop, 1 second. What's the one characteristic about Moses that makes him a disastrous leader? Pop, go ahead. Yeah. What are you going to say?
One step before Michael suggested
Yeah.
the land had to be conquered, and Joshua did things that Moses would never do.
All right. So on the one hand,
The problem, the people would always say, that's what Joshua said, let's go ask Moses.
all right. So the problem is, if Moses is still alive, that's actually here someplace. If Moses is still alive, Joshua, turn the page over, go down 3 paragraphs. Pop. Moses said, if I must die, allow me first to be Joshua's disciple. And God allows him to try. Moshe is miserable with envy. Moshe went over to Joshua and asked, what did God say to you? Joshua replied, when the word of God was revealed to you, did I ask you what it said to you? In that instant, Moses cried out in anguish and said, rather 100 deaths than a single pang of envy. Master of the universe, until now I sought life, now my soul is surrendered to you. So the implication, if Moses stays alive, no one could ever stand up and be a leader. Because as soon as the people are in the land, they're going to run back to him. He will never, and not just, that's actually not the problem here. The problem here is what? He can't take second place. He can't play second chair. He can't be second banana, right? Because every time Joshua makes a decision, he questions it. You sure that's the right thing to do? I have a friend, there's a very great synagogue in the Midwest. Their senior rabbi retired after many years. They brought in a brilliant young guy. The senior rabbi had an office right there. That guy lasted 1 year. So they hired a second guy to take the place, and they had a big dinner for the senior rabbi. And they gave him a beautiful gift, a brand new Winnebago and $1,000 in gasoline. Does that tell you something? Because they knew that as long as this guy was in the building, no new rabbi would ever be able to establish himself. It just wouldn't work. Right? So here's what happened. But think about the character of Moshe and why he can't be the leader who brings us into the land. So one of his problems is that he has an anger problem. He doesn't know how to settle disputes quietly. He tends to hit people with things and rocks. That's a problem. Because the guy who's the founder sees things in absolute terms. And if you're an absolutist and you're living with real people in a real place, you become a tyrant. The great tyrants of the 20th century, right? Stalin, Lenin, Mao, the great tyrants were ideologues. They're ideologues. They have an idea. If you're not part of the idea, they kill you. They put you in the gulag, right? You can't have that guy. You need to have a different kind of person take us in. Danny.
I think it's also not just the kind of person Moses was, but the kind of people God wanted the Israelites to be.
Right.
So they were very needy, and Moses was a father figure, and the people they were in the desert were not the people they would see once they entered Israel.
Right.
So there wasn't going to be any more manna. There wasn't going to be any water from stones.
Right.
They were going to have to fight their battles and do their thing, and Moses probably wasn't the guy for the job.
So thank you, Dr. Freud. That's wonderful. If daddy's always around, Junior's always going to be infantilized.
If I don't
He's-
teach my kid how to tie his shoes, he's going to have to get Velcro shoes all life.
Yeah, but at a certain point, you say to the kid, you're going to have to figure this one out on your own. Because I'm not going to spend my life being right there to solve all your problems. And as long as daddy's around, as long as Moshe is around, this people never grows up. They never become self-reliant. They never become responsible. Because Moshe has, and remember, it's not just that Moses is smarter, wiser, older, has memories. He talks to God. Like he has the answers. He's the guy that has the answers. So at a certain point, this is another story that we learn. At a certain point, the people have to be able to take responsibility for finding their own answers and not keep running to God. Not keep running to God. So I have a friend who's a minister. And the sweetest thing, whenever he has a big decision, he prays on it. He said to me once, do you pray for God's guidance when you have big decisions? I say, hell no, I ask my wife. Like why would God tell me what to do? My wife knows what to do. I mean, it's not a Jewish idea that somehow, like, if I have a problem, God's going to tell me what to do. No. I'll ask my wife. I'll ask people who know more than me, and I'll make a decision. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. And if it's right, it's right. I mean, it's not a Jewish idea that you have a problem, you run to God. And that's Moshe's MO. You never grow up. You'll be an infant the whole time. Ready? The following amazing dialogue between Moshe and God, in which the Creator tries to persuade his trusted servant to submit to his laws. You must die, Moses. Number two. There's the one going down the sheet. We have time? Yeah, a little bit. Otherwise, the people will turn you into an idol. Oh, that's a powerful one. So, again, who are they talking about? Talking about Jesus, right? Okay? Don't you trust me, asked Moshe? Haven't I proved my worth? Have I not destroyed the golden calf? Right? You're afraid that I'm going to allow them to make me into an idol? I'm the opponent of idolatry. God could have replied that he trusted Moshe, but not others. Instead, he chose to make his point by appealing to the prophet's common sense. Moshe, who are you? The son of Amram, said Moshe. And who is Amram? The son of Yitzhar, said Moshe. And who is Yitzhar? The son of Kahat. And Kahat was he, son of Levi. And Levi, the son of Yaakov, son of Isaac, son of Abraham. And thus he continued to the first man, Adam. And Adam, where is Adam? He's dead, answered Moshe. Adam is dead. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, dead. They're all dead. And the others too, all dead. Yes, said God, your ancestors are dead, and you alone wish to remain alive forever? So what is he telling him? What is he telling him? This is the human condition. You are a human being. You tell me you don't want to be turned into an idol, then you have to accept your humanity. And this is part of being a human being. And as painful as it is that death is part of the human condition, death is part of the human condition. And even you, Moshe, have to accept that. You're part of the human, you're part of humanity. And this is what it means to be human. Billy, go ahead. Well, yes and no. Even Moshe wasn't listened to, though. The whole story is how, it took us 40 years to get through the desert because we're a pain in the neck, right? So we've always been a difficult people to lead. To this day, to this day, it's a difficult people to lead. That's the national myth. Am Kshei Oref, we're this stiff-necked people. It's always been the story. It's always been the story. The question is, what kind of leader do you need for any particular moment? Right? Or what happens when you take a leader and you elevate him into divinity? If you take a person and you elevate him into divinity, what does that say about humanity? So what's also being argued here is that you can be human and be great. Greatness, you can achieve greatness within a human lifetime. You don't have to live 10 lifetimes. You don't have to live forever to be great. Yes?
I was just going to say that in Bialik's version of this Agadah, there's a wonderful thing at the very end
Yeah,
where God says, who's going to control my anger?
that's coming.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Shekinah whispers in his ear. It's an ironic statement.
Yeah.
Moses will sit at your right side and whisper in your ear and calm your anger. What is his greatest trait? Is anger itself.
Yeah. Well, because the image of Moshe and God in the desert is this image of parents taking kids on a long car trip. You ever have that experience? You know, and as long as both of you aren't angry at the same time, you might make it home. Right? But if both of you get angry at the same time, that's bad news. And Moshe is always calming God down, and God's always calming Moshe down. So without Moshe in the world, who calms God down? It's a very beautiful statement. Brian. Yeah. All right, give me 5 more minutes. We'll get to it. They're at the bottom of the page. There's a few more rounds of this that are fun, and I want to do before we get there, okay? Can we get there in a minute? So, at this, it says, but Moses discovered in himself new gifts of rhetoric. All of a sudden, Moshe can argue with God, right? Adam, he said, Adam stole the fruit, right? Abraham had 2 sons. One didn't belong to your people. That's equally true of Isaac, but not me. Both of my sons are children of Israel, right? My kids turned out good, he said. At this point, God seems to have lost his patience. Moshe, he said, you killed an Egyptian. Who ordered you to kill him? Not I. And Moses said, yeah, I killed one Egyptian, but you killed many. You killed all the firstborns. You want to punish me? Still, Moses knew that no matter how good his argument, it didn't change the situation. The divine will reflected a divine, not a human logic. So this notion of invoking, I think that this is the story of the anger. Invoking the death of the Egyptian is confronted with a situation, you tend to kill people. That's not a good pattern of governance. That's not going to work for a people governing in a land. Now it gets surreal. Now the next part of it is really, this is psychedelic. In desperation, he turns to all of creation for help. So Moshe now, who they imagine has all of this mystical power in him, right? So he says, heaven and earth pray for me. And no, they said, we cannot. Then he pleaded with the sun and the moon to pray for him. No, we cannot. And the sweetness of this, what's the sweetness of this? This is a man who so loves life. No matter how bitter his life was, he so loves life, he doesn't want to leave the world. And the idea that a person on their deathbed is pleading with the universe, let me have a little more time. There's something plaintive, something pitiful about this, right? It's just pitiful. But nature isn't going to come to your help, right? Mountains, planets, mountains, rivers, no, they said, we cannot even pray for ourselves. Then Moses turns to the sea. You, please intercede in my favor. But the sea has a claim against him, right? The sea, cruel and vindictive, this is before Moby Dick was written, the sea, cruel and vindictive, reminded them of their first meeting long ago when he was leading a newly liberated people toward challenging adventure. Son of Amram, that's Moshe, the sea sneered at Moses. What's the matter with you today? Now you need me? You who struck me with a stick and made me withdraw in order to let your people pass? The sea says, now you're coming to me? You know, you beat me back. And now, nature will not save you. This is the plaintive cry of a person who wants a little more time and feels that the verdict is unfair. And he says, and nature will not save you. Ruefully, he said to himself, once upon a time I was a king and I gave orders. Now I'm on my knees and the whole world is indifferent. Whereupon a surge of generosity, the illustrious angel Sarpanim, Metatron, who's the chief of the angels. In the Bible, in the rabbinic tradition, there's a whole hierarchy of angels. They all have names and ranks and powers. gave him friendly advice to stop opposing God's plan. I was present when the decision was taken, and I heard them proclaim the decree was sealed and would not be suspended. Moses should have heeded such knowledge, well-meaning advice. He should have left in a gracious, dignified manner, but he did not. He went on refusing to die, pleading, crying for another day, another hour, as any common mortal, and not the prophet of prophets who imposed on his vision of mankind, the teacher of teachers who felt God's fire breath naked face. That's Wiesel's comment. So what do we have a picture of? At the end, what is Moshe? Just like us. Pitiful, kind of pitiful. I mean, the man of such power ends up as pitiful. Death humbles everybody. Death humbles us all, even the greatest of the greatest. And now it even gets, here's the surreal part. So great was his despair that he declared himself ready to renounce his human condition in exchange for a few more days of life. Master of the universe, let me live like an animal who feeds on grass, who drinks spring waters, content to watch the days come and go. I think this is, part of this I think is a reference to this notion of resurrection, of reincarnation. Right? Can I be reincarnated as an animal? And God says, no. Man is not an animal. He must live as human or not at all. Permit me to stay here as a bird, friend of the wind, returning to nest every night, grateful for the hours it's lived. And God says, no, man must live and die like a man. This is a rejection of reincarnation. Then God uses a striking expression. Moses, you die. You've already made too many words. Which is really interesting, because what is Moshe? At the beginning of the story, when we first meet Moshe at the burning bush, Lo ish dvarim anochi, a man of no words. And now God says, okay, enough words. I've given you this many words. It's an interesting phrase. Like every person's given a certain number of words in their life. Moshe got an extra measure. And now comes the pitiful part. When Moses finally agreed to accept the inevitable, he begged God not to place him into the hands of the angel of death who frightened him. So this God will give him. This God will give him. He promised 3 times that the angel of death moved toward him. He was powerless to do anything. So Moses spends his last moments blessing the tribes of Israel. And just do this quickly. When he reached the top of the mountain, he halted. You have 1 more minute, God warned him, so as not to deprive him his right to death. And Moshe lay down, and God said, close your eyes. And Moshe closed his eyes, and God said, fold your arms across your chest. And Moses folded his arms across the chest. And here's the word of the Bible, which we just read. So Moshe, the servant Lord, died there in the land of Moab, al pi Adonai. Al pi can either mean according to the word of, but the Midrash wants to take it much more literally. Pi means peh, mouth, right? Thereupon God kissed him. Al pi Adonai, God kissed him. So he was given one dispensation, one favor. What was the one favor that he was given? He died in the sweetest way a human being can die. You know, and some of us have been with loved ones when they died. And they're gruesome deaths and difficult deaths and painful. And then some people die very peacefully. Al pi Adonai. So the man who was intimate with God, who knew God face to face, in his last moment in the world, what's his last moment in the world? Think about a kiss for a minute. If a person's lying down with their head back and someone comes to kiss them, right? What's the last thing you see? He sees the eyes of God. Just the image is just astonishing, right? So the last thing Moses' eyes beheld in the world was the face of God coming to kiss him. And with the kiss, he took away his soul, and God, if one might say so, kiviyachol is the, right, wept, as it's written in the Psalms, who will rise up for me against evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? So the beautiful thing is, God leans in to kiss him, and as soon as God kisses him, what is God's response? God begins to cry. It's a beautiful, beautiful scene, because this is his friend. Because this is the only human being who ever truly understood what the mission of divinity in the world is. Truly got it. This is the guy who truly became God's intimate. And God begins to cry for him. God begins to cry for him. Well, look at... Look what it says. Look, read the Midrash, right? Right? It is written in, thereupon God kissed Moshe, took away his soul with a kiss of the mouth, and God, kiviyachol, if one might say so, wept, as it is written in Psalms, who will rise up for me against evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? For me. For God. Moshe, God, here's the only human being who has ever fully, wholly invested, selflessly invested in the process of doing good in the world. But he's still a man. Again, you got to remember, they're arguing with the church fathers next door. For the church fathers next door, the only personage in the world who could be fully pure had to be a person who's God's son. Had to be half man, half God. Had to be part of divinity. They're messing with Trinity next door. Right? The rabbis reject all that. What do they say? You can be human and still invested in the work of divinity. And still invested with divinity, but you're still human. So the moment you really, you get this, that whole sense is that moment. And by the way, it's really interesting to me that in the Christian myth, does God cry at the death of Jesus? Is that ever part of the Christian myth? Isn't that strange? If that's your son, wouldn't you mourn? Ter kriya? And this idea that God mourns for him. But he's human. But you're human, and see, the rabbis answer, you can be human and still invested in the process of divinity, in the work of divinity in the world, in the work of God in the world. But you're still human. And they're arguing with the Christians next door. You don't have to be attached to the Son of God. You are the Son of God. You are the child of God. Doesn't mean you're not human. That's the, you see, it's a beautiful thing. And it's a very powerful family myth. You know, death even upsets God. Even God is weeping, right? But this is the human condition. This is what it means to be human. And notice again, even in the Midrash, he doesn't go into heaven and it doesn't give you that whole state. He dies, like all the rest of us. Yes. This is where specifically where Kaddish comes down to us, but this is where the tradition comes down. Yeah, look, there's a line in the book of Psalms, it's in the Hallel, and I forget the exact line, about how Yakar Chasadav Ladonai, the righteous are precious to God. And the death of the righteous disturbs God too. It's like to quote a great movie, you know, it's a disturbance in the force, right? Now, here's the grieving part, Brian. We'll get to this. Yeah, Ronnie.
What's the answer?
Yeah.
Who's going to stand up?
Well, that's the Midrash is now turning to you. That's why we have Torah, Torat Moshe. You have the Torah of Moshe, so you and I can do that. That's the point. Rav Yehuda, I'm sorry. Yes, please. You have to real loud because I'm an old guy. Yeah. No. That's the point here. It's a great question, but the point is he's not half man, half God. He's all man. He dies like all the rest of us, and like all the rest of us, he don't want to die. He ends up begging and pleading. The idea is to show how human he is, but a human being can still be invested with divinity, can still do the work of God in the world, can still fight evil. Go ahead, Gelman. You're on your... Come on. Fess up.
Look, it's great what you said as always about the human finitude is on the mark, but I see it as a testimony to the end of a theological era.
Okay.
And that era is the era where they have sons of the lumber, you gather to kin, death is the end of you. And that era ends
Okay.
as soon as Alexander the Great and his tutor, Aristotle, come in, conquer the land, and talk to a bunch of scholars who turn into the rabbis
Right.
and explain to them the difference between matter and form.
Okay.
And when they explain that, Judaism, as we know it, is not just change, it is created.
Okay.
And that creation takes away the agony of the step.
Okay.
As
So your suggestion is,
There is
yeah,
a glory
yeah,
to the end of your soul being gathered up and living with God.
Yeah.
And nowhere,
Yeah.
nowhere, because they don't have that vocabulary.
right,
Does the Torah say, God said, why are you despairing? Your soul will live with me. Because they don't have the notion of soul.
right.
Because in the biblical period, death is the end of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that view that human beings cannot accept.
Right.
And it is that view that after the Greeks, both Judaism and Christianity said, you don't have to accept.
So then why don't the rabbis say that in the Midrash? By the time of the rabbis, they have that language already.
They do, but they're caught.
Yeah,
You see, they're caught. They have to explain a Torah
yeah,
that doesn't have neshama.
yeah,
And their world has neshama.
yeah,
So, and they don't want to raise the question, which is inevitable and immediate,
right,
which is, why didn't God just say to Moses, why do you despair?
right,
Your soul will be with me.
right,
They can't get into that because they invented that. Well, they didn't invent it. They took it from the Greeks who invented it.
right.
That we are made up of two principles.
Yeah, okay. So, do you understand what Rabbi Gelman's point was? So the Greeks come and teach us this idea of soul as an immaterial reality, something that's real but not stuff. And therefore, if it's real but not stuff, when the body dies, the soul can go on living. So the obvious answer here should be God should say to Moshe, don't worry, you'll be with me in heaven forever, right? And we would paint that on the sides of synagogues, the way you have pictures of Jesus with the Father God in all the churches of Rome, right? Right, good. And I asked Rabbi Gelman, well, if that's what the rabbis believe, because by the time of the rabbis they had that idea, why don't they say so? And Rabbi Gelman said, because they were caught between what the Bible says and what they wanted it to say, right? I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to argue with you on this one. I think they're arguing with the Christians next door. They specifically don't want him in a trinity. Because they want you to know that life matters. Because if I give him eternal life and he lives with the Father in heaven for the rest of time, then you will say, what am I worried about in this world? Who cares who I vote for? Screw this world. This world isn't real. The next world is the world that's real. I'll just endure my time here, do what I'm supposed to do, and I'll get to heaven. And the rabbis insist that's not Judaism. That's a different, go next door if you want those guys, right? That's a Judaism, but that's not their Judaism. It is a Judaism. It does. No. Which survived, yes, but not as the only one.
See, what you're saying is about a different question.
Yeah, I know.
Can Moses be God or a part of God?
Right. That's what the gentleman's question was. Right. Yeah.
The question I'm raising is, why isn't there comfort in death?
Yeah.
And the comfort in death that we created after contact with the Greeks
Yeah.
was
Afterlife.
death is not the end of us.
Right. Right. But see, I'm going to argue back. So, yes, you're right. That idea is a very strong idea in the tradition. In all of our prayers, it's all over the place. But in this particular case, they wanted to make a more specific point. Chaye olam natah b'tochenu, eternal life is planted among us, is the bracha you say over the Torah. Moshe lives in his book. He lives in his words. He lives in his legacy. I know you disagree. It's okay. It's good. It's good. Machlokes, it's a. I know. Yes. Why do you say Chaye Olam B'Tochenu over the Torah? You don't say that bracha at a funeral. You should say that bracha at a funeral, right? Yeah, let him rest there. But that doesn't mean he's going to live forever among us like this. Let me get to the last one. Brian wants to get the last one. Rav Yehuda. This I took from the Gemara. This is from Talmud, not from Wiesel. That's why the language is much rougher. Rabbi Yehuda reported the name of Shmuel. Shmuel, 1st century great rabbi. 3,000 laws were forgotten during the period of mourning for Moshe. So what happened? Moshe dies, makes Joshua the leader, right? Joshua knows everything Moshe knows, right? During Shiva, Joshua forgot 3,000 laws. I wish he would have forgotten the lobster law. That'd have been, I wish I could have chosen the 3,000 he forgot. That'd have been so, jeez. Why not that one? The people asked Joshua, ask God. Go ask God. You don't know, go ask God like Moshe used to do. Go ask God. He replied, Lo b'shamayim, it's not in heaven. What's not in heaven? Torah's not in heaven. We don't do that anymore. We don't go ask God to tell us what to do. They said to the Israelites said to Shmuel, ask God. He replied, these are the commandments, implying that since the promulgation of the commandments, no prophet has the right to introduce anything new. So we don't go back to God directly. Since Moshe, there's a change in the operating procedure of Judaism. Now, if you have a question, you come to Rabbi Hirsch and you ask her, is Dr. Pepper kosher for Pesach? Does she ask God? No. What does she do? She opens the Shulchan Aruch and she looks, right? Pesach, Dr. Pepper, there it is. It's right there. You look in the book or you interpret the book. You ask the book to help you understand what God wants. Rabbi Yehuda reported the name of Rav. That's the other tradition. Shmuel is Surah or Pompadita. Rav is the other great yeshiva. When Moses departed the world, he said to Joshua, ask me concerning all the doubts you have. He replied to him, my master, have I ever left you for 1 hour and gone elsewhere? Didn't you write in your Torah, but the servant Joshua departed not out of the tabernacle? So before he goes, the master says to the disciple, all right, I'm about to die. Ask me any question you want. So what does the disciple say? Master, I know it all. we never spent a day apart in the last 40 years. I know it all. Immediately the strength of Moses weakened, and Joshua forgot 300 laws, and there rose in his mind 700 doubts. Then all of Israel rose up to kill him. Because Jews are really hard to lead, Billy. Right? They ask you, is Dr. Pepper kosher of Pesach? You say, I don't know. They want to kill you. I'm telling you. Right? The Holy One, blessed be, said to Joshua, it's not possible to tell you. Go and occupy their attention with war. Wag the dog. Right? Take them. So what happens? Moshe dies, and what do we lose? What? We lose laws, but there's something deeper than we lose. What do we lose? We lose certainty. Say that. Yes. Why do we lose certainty? Because now if you have a question, what do you need to do? You have to open the book and interpret the book. But interpretation is always an uncertain science. You're always going to have rabbis who disagree. Right? Rabbi on the north side of Pico says it's kosher. Rabbi on the south side of Pico says it's treif. Both guys have big beards. Both guys wear that silly black costume and the big hats. We're going to start wearing yellow hats. I'm going to be a yellow hat chassid. Both guys frummer than frum. Right? And yet they say kosher treif because interpretation is not an exact science. We lose certainty when we lose Moshe. But what do we gain? Adulthood, maturity. Because now we don't have to go run to Papa and ask the answer to the question. We have to figure out the questions the way grown-ups do, with reason, with judgment, with moral imagination. Moshe dies, and what is born? A mature Judaism. We lose the great lawgiver, right? There's a wonderful statement in the paper talking about the presidency, and they said George Washington retired after the second term. Could have run for third term. Decided to retire after the second term, right? Sorry? He retired at whatever time. He retired after his term, refused to be King George of America, and the British Prime Minister said, that's the greatest man who ever lived. The idea that you have to retire in order to allow the people to rise up and become the mature people they are, despite the messiness of that, despite the terrible messiness of that. That's the maturing process. Moshe dies and we're born as a mature people. I think these are beautiful midrashim. Next week, we're going to open the book of Kohelet and figure out the meaning of life. We're going to daven in just a moment. Please stick around and join us for prayers this morning. It'll be a brief service because there's only no bar mitzvah. We're delighted to have everybody. Shana Tova, Happy New Year. A sweet New Year.